stuff, the greases and oils, they're going to float to the top. And the clean water, if you will, as more water comes in, gets pushed out the other end of the septic tank. Coming out this end of the tank, usually you'll have a long pipe, and it could be perforated with holes. And this pipe, a lot of times, will end in a gravel field. So, essentially, your wastewater comes into your septic tank, gets mixed up, the heavy stuff settles out, and now this heavy stuff will be degraded by the bacteria that are there. Same with the oils and greases, they'll eventually be degraded, and clean water per se exits the other end of the septic tank. Occasionally, what you'll have happen is that this leach line here, this leach field or this leach line will become impacted, and so your septic tank can back up and not work. You'll often hear people that need to get their septic tank pumped out. If your septic tank is working correctly, you should not have to get it pumped out. It should have a level of water always in it, with water coming in, pushing out old water. But anytime these leach fields get impacted, when I say impacted, that means you've got a lot of material that is still flowing out. I mean, it's not all being removed. And so it can build up, and so you can get kind of like a clay that forms in your leach field. And then the water can't go anywhere. It can't filter through the clay that builds up, and so this backs up and it doesn't drain. So if you have your septic tank needing to be pumped out, it likely is because your leach field has become impacted. The other thing that you don't have to spend money on if you have a septic tank, you'll see these ads for Rid-X and other kinds of organisms that you can pour into your septic tank to help with the digesting of the materials. You are putting plenty of stuff in your tank to help with the digesting of the materials. Unless you are pouring toxic material into your sinks, like tons of chlorine bleach. I mean, not just a little bit, but I mean gallons of chlorine bleach. You're not going to kill all of these bacteria. And so you don't need to put more bacteria in your septic tank. I know that those that produce Rid-X would disagree with me, but for the most part, your septic tank, if it's functioning correctly, the microbes themselves will work to break down the material that is there. You don't have to add any special microbes.
What about for the roots that get into the leach line?
That can be a problem for sure. Yeah, and that can.
Then you can add to that, right?
Yes, because that's a different kind of issue altogether. Your leach line is now impacted with the roots, and you got to break them up. So if you're treating for that, then yeah, that's a different kind of. Okay, so your book talks a little bit about drinking water. A couple of things that we want to say with regards to drinking water. The treatment is going to be a little bit different, okay? First off, our source hopefully is a little bit cleaner. You know, we're either pulling it from surface water or groundwater. If we're pulling it from surface water, then we've got to concern ourselves with upstream contamination. Are there treatment plants upstream from the river that could be dumping into this river? Are there other sources upstream that can be dumping in? Groundwater, you generally don't have that kind of concern. You still have to treat groundwater, but groundwater has already been percolating through the ground for a while and been kind of cleaned in that way. And it might be high in nitrates and other things, but generally for coliform bacteria, you're not going to find high counts in groundwater. Surface water could be more of a concern. In addition to that, anytime you would have heavy rains, the watershed runoff into the surface water can contribute to bacteria and contamination. The treatment process for drinking water like I said, it's a little bit different. First, the water comes in and they let it stand in a reservoir. This is going to, of course, allow things to settle down. They could add a flocculant. A flocculant is some chemical, usually it's an alum or something, that causes particle matter to stick together. Small little particulate matter that might be in the water to stick together. Again, as they stick together, they get heavier and they'll settle down. So it's another way of cleaning particulate matter out of the water column. Then we'll see the water filtered. And generally this is going to include sand filters, gravel filters. And it's going to remove a lot of the bacteria. And again, if you still got any particulate matter there, this is going to aid in removing particulate matter. And then finally, the water will be chlorinated before it is distributed to your house. Sometimes this disinfection step right here can be UV. Some treatment plants, or I should say some water treatment plants, use UV as a means of killing the bacteria. Some use ozone, but those can be difficult and expensive.
Would you use this product to clean a aquarium?
No, you wouldn't want to do that because it would probably affect the fish. But what this does is if you're talking about using UV or ozone, one of the things you have to realize is with UV, it doesn't penetrate very far. So the water that you're treating has to have a very narrow column in order to get complete treatment. So that's why UV isn't as readily used as chlorine. Chlorine is a much cheaper means of disinfection, but it does have a risk. It does have a danger. Chlorine gas can be fatal. Questions about water treatment?
It's just like basic water treatment, not all like water companies use.
Exactly, yes. There may be subtle differences depending on what their water source is. They might have to take extra steps if there's a contaminant that they have to remove. Or if they have a really clean source, they might not have to add a flocculant. So yeah, but in general, this is the steps that will be taken.
Because you would think that they would only have like one around the water, but then you have like all these like corrections different.
Yeah. You've got groundwater, surface water. There's a push for a desal plant being built, so that'll be a source of water.
Up there, you're saying that there's a meth in that sludges, or what is that?
There's a what?
Is there some methane in that sludge?
I'm not sure I understand.
Methanogens, what does that have to do with the sludges?
Oh, the methanogens? Yeah, they're in the activated, they're in the digester here. So they're breaking down material producing methane. So just to kind of wrap up this chapter, a few things here. One of the important things then for water treatment is being able to test the water. We got to know what's in the water. Are we cleaning it effectively? And our biggest concern is pathogens. You know, what kind of pathogens might be in the water. We're talking about this in laboratory, so some of you have been exposed to this already. But our primary concern are intestinal pathogens. So Vibrio cholera is an example of an intestinal pathogen that we have to address, you know, that we don't want in our water. But we can't test for all pathogens. It's just impossible to do so. So we use an indicator organism. In this case, our indicator organism is E. coli. E. coli doesn't cause illness for the most part. Most strains don't. You're exposed to E. coli every day, so usually it doesn't make us sick. There are some strains that do, some strains that can be fatal, but generally they don't. So why do we monitor for E. coli? The presence of E. coli suggests then fecal contamination. So if you've got fecal contamination, that means there's other intestinal pathogens in the water, or potentially other intestinal pathogens. So in this way, we can look for those intestinal pathogens, or we can look for fecal contamination without having to test for every microbe that might be in the water column. One of the things that we do is a test called MPN, or most probable number, and that's just what you're doing in lab. So I won't say any more about that here in lecture. Those that haven't had lab will say more there. But there are other things that we can do as well. We can do a membrane filtration where we are just looking for the presence absence of the microbe. One more thing to mention here, and that's bioremediation. Bioremediation is using microbes to degrade or detoxify pollutants. To a certain extent, you can say that that is what we are doing with our treatment process here. You know, we're using microbes to help break down the BOD. But in this case here, we're talking about more environmental pollutants. Bioremediation is using microbes to deal with these pollutants, and there are two types of bioremediation. You can have a biostimulation, and in this case, you are enhancing the growth of microbes that are already there. So indigenous microbes, microbes that are already in the community, you're enhancing them. You could think of our activated sludge tank as a type of biostimulation. Simply adding the oxygen that we do, we enhance the microbial growth in the activated sludge tank. But we also have bioaugmentation,